You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Kat Ventura, executive producer of Teka Teka News. This week, Pag-asa issued an El Nino alert, which reported an 80% likelihood of below normal rainfall this June, July, and August. And this means farmers are among those expected to be hit the hardest, as El Nino can lead to dry spells and drought. The challenges of climate change, along with our farmers' need for better support, have contributed to lesser crop yield and have discouraged younger generations to work in agriculture. And this, of course, can turn into a serious problem for our country's food security. So for today's episode of Teka Teka News, we wanted to share a snippet from Ang Ating Kwentong Klima, which is a series from our other podcast, A Better Normal. In part 2 of Ang Ating Kwentong Klima, our producer, Trisha Aquino, discusses a better normal for food security and how we can put farmers at the heart of this future we're building today. Here's the snippet from part 2.
Some of the hazards brought about by climate change include extreme rainfall and intense and more frequent storms, but also extreme heat and warming temperatures. Floods damage crops, and too much rainfall causes soil erosion, which in turn strips the earth of its fertility, reducing our farmers' yield in the long run. On the other end is extreme heat and extended periods of drought, which dry up the soil and even increase chances of wildfires. Warm temperatures are also associated with pests and disease that plague the crops, again diminishing harvest for our farmers.
So there's going to be decrease in food availability, and that affects not just the farmer who is relying also on their own crops for subsistence, but of course the food availability in the market for the consumers. No? And then, of course, without that security or availability of food, there's going to be decreased health and productivity, which ultimately can lead to loss of life.
Pero hindi lang pananim ng mga magsasaka ang apektado ng nagbabagong klima. Apektado rin ang huli ng mga mangingisda natin. Siyempre, kung palaging bumabagyo, mababawasan ang panahong pumapalaot sila. Extreme heat also has the same effect. Sino ba namang gustong magtagal sa matinding init ng araw? We heard in the previous episode how the Nabaoynon community in Aklan has adopted new fishing methods to adjust to drought and flooding. But we also have to acknowledge the destruction these weather-related hazards pose. Kulang ang adaptation or means to adjust to the impacts of the changing climate. Just imagine the typhoons that rip fishing boats and fishing pens to smithereens. Climate change also affects the habitats of fish. For example, warming waters drive them to go to cooler habitats. Pag masyado namang maulan, the soil from the uplands are washed into the seas. Kaya kailangan lumipat ng mga mangingisda para may maiuwing huli. Sometimes even farther out at sea, costing time, effort, and money for fuel, among other things. Warming sea temperatures also contribute to diseases and invasive fish species, thus putting more pressure on fisherfolk's catch.
So the reduced yield per catch of fish contributes to decreased income, decreased food availability, decreased health and productivity, and ultimately, whether that's directly or indirectly, to the loss of life.
We've looked at the context of the conversation around food security. Climate change poses a huge threat to agriculture and fisheries, and hundreds of thousands of lives are at stake. But for some people taking on this challenge, the fight is personal.
My parents are farmers. I grew up in a rural farm in North Cotabato.
That's Christine Hodloman of Agrea, an innovative, inclusive, and for-purpose agribusiness. They believe that they are in the most essential business, that of feeding people, which is why promoting dignity for all stakeholders in the agricultural system, especially the farmers, is at the core of their work.
And dung college, while doing our thesis, dapat sabi ng prof namin, yung thesis mo, kasi gagawin mo siya ng 1 year, dapat it should be very relevant to you and to your community. So yung napili ko po, since I have a communications background also, is communicating climate smart rice varieties to farmers in our areas. And during my survey, I found out na yung mga farmers sa area namin ay tumatanda na. And I researched about it. The average age of farmers that time, 2016, was 57. And yung tinanong ko po sila during focus group discussion, ano yung obserbasyon nila, bakit maliit na lang yung kabataang farmers sa area namin? Sabi nila, sila mismo yung nag-encourage po sa mga anak nila na huwag pumunta sa agriculture kasi mahirap po yung agriculture, both economically and physically, kasi ayaw nilang maranasan ng mga anak nila yon. So it struck me very personally that time, and it has become a personal mission of mine to really contribute to agriculture development.
Since then, Christine has been organizing trainings and workshops to build the capacity of the farmers in her community. Agrea's goal is to make them grounded farmers through values formation, skilled farmers through technical training, and empowered farmers through financial literacy.
And I'm in 2 areas po. First is including more youth in agriculture. The second one is including more women in agriculture. Agriculture in the Philippines right now is really male-dominated, and including the youth and women in agriculture would help us to the future of food security. Tayo po dito sa Pilipinas, we're around 110 million people, and yung mga farmers natin pakonte na ng pakonte. Imagine 10 to 20 years from now, sino na po yung magpapakain sa atin?
And that was today's episode takeover of Ang Ating Kwentong Klima. If you want to learn more about the importance of empowering farmers, click the link in the description of this episode to hear the rest of part 2 of Ang Ating Kwentong Klima. This series was supported by the Oscar M. Lopez Center for Climate Change Adaptation in partnership with Asia Society Philippines. Again, I'm Kat Ventura. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. For more explainers on issues that matter, follow Teka Teka News and The Better Normal on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Maraming salamat po.